Good morning, Clinton College students, faculty, staff, alumni, and friends. My name is Lashika Gaston. I am a junior from Rock Hill, South Carolina, majoring in religious studies. I welcome you to the Clinton College 2020 Fall Convocation virtual broadcast. Fall Convocation is one of the ways we come together as a community to honor our commitment as scholars and leaders and to celebrate the beginning of the academic year. We are elated to have as our guest speaker Dr. Eddie S. Glaude, noted commentator, author, and chairman of the Department of African American Studies at Princeton University in Princeton, New Jersey. We encourage you to submit questions and reflections in the comments on Facebook and YouTube. At the conclusion of Dr. Glaude's speech, we will share some of your questions during a brief Q&A. On behalf of the entire Clinton College family, we say thank you for spending part of your day with us. Be sure to join us on our social media platforms for updates on future events, new academic programs, course offerings, and other activities. I invite you now to join the Clinton College Choir under the direction of Dr. Tony McNeil as they lead us in singing the National Negro Hymn, Lift Every Voice and Sing, by James Weldon and J. Rosamond Johnson.
Lift every voice and sing, till earth and heaven ring. Ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let the rejoicing rise high as the lifting tides, and it resounds the little golden sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark has installed us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Praising the rising sun, heavenly day begun. Let us march on where victory is won. Slowly the road we trod, enter the chastening God, built in the days when old unborn had died. Live with a steady beat, and let our weary feet unto the place towards our Father's side. We have come over a way that with tears has been watered. We have come treading our path through the blood of the Son. Out from the blooming past, till now we stand at last, where the white gleam of a bright star is cast. God of our weary years, God of our silent tears, thou who hast brought us thus far on the way, thou who hast undone let into your light, keep us forever in the path we pray. Bless our feet, straight from the places our God will be resting. Bless our hearts, drunk with the wine of the world we forget. Shall we keep our faith? May we forever stand true to our God, true to our native land.
Amen. Greetings. I am Dr. Lester McCorn, the 13th president of Clinton College in Rock Hill, South Carolina. First, we want to give honor to Almighty God, to our chair of our board of trustees, Bishop Mildred B. Hines, to our vice chair, Dr. Benjamin Dixon, and to the entire board of trustees, to Dean Alvin McLamb and the entire administrative cabinet of Clinton College, and to all of the faculty and staff, and most of all to our phenomenal students, especially the class of 2021. And we are happy to welcome the class of 2024. I greet you in the wonderful name of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. It is my honor to welcome you to our fall convocation. 2020 has been an extraordinary year, full of so many daunting and devastating challenges. It's almost a miracle that we're even able to begin another academic year. I want to especially express my gratitude to the awesome faculty of Clinton College who made the pivot to a totally virtual campus this semester. We have become the new Clinton College. We are becoming stronger, wiser, and better despite the painstaking changes our world is going through. Last weekend, the world lost one of its brightest stars, Chadwick Boseman. Boseman was an alumnus of another HBCU, Howard University, where he undoubtedly learned how to live in Wakanda and become the Black Panther. I joined with millions of others in paying tribute to his peerless talent by watching Black Panther again. I recall the scene of the royal challenge before ascending to the throne. T'Challa was fighting M'Baku for the rights of kingship. He was flailing in near defeat when his mother, the queen, yelled to him, "Show them who you are." Of course, he rose up and won the battle in a triumphant celebration for Wakanda. But that scene spoke more loudly to us because we learned what Chadwick Boseman had gone through over the last 4 years of his life. We couldn't tell in any of his incredible performances that we witnessed that he was sick. We mistakenly say that someone lost their battle with cancer. Chadwick didn't lose, he won because he showed us who he was. And in the face of this global pandemic of COVID 19, and in front of the insidious racist plague of COVID 16-19, Clinton College, I exhort you today to show them who you are. Today, my brothers and sisters, we are blessed to have another one of our brightest stars, Professor Eddie Glaude. Dr. Glaude is one of my longtime friends. We've known each other since our teenage days in our Wakanda, better known as Morehouse College. I have always admired and respected his intellectual prowess, his gravitas and grace, even at a very young age. I am proud of all of his accomplishments as a stellar scholar, a social critic, prolific author, and provocative commentator on MSNBC. He hails from Moss Point, Mississippi. He holds a bachelor's degree from Morehouse, a master's degree from Temple University, and a PhD in religion from Princeton University. He is the James S. McDonald Distinguished University Professor and Chair of African American Studies at Princeton. We are honored to welcome him to Clinton College, and I'm pleased to announce that we are doing a campus-wide reading of his newest book, Begin Again. We will have discussions during the semester, and next semester, if time permits, Dr. Glaude will return to share a conversation on this campus. Ladies and gentlemen, my friend and brother, and our fall convocation speaker, Dr. Eddie S. Glaude Jr.
First, I want to thank all of the persons who have made my time with you this morning possible. This virtual world can make matters easier, but it also presents interesting challenges. I'm delighted that Darren Kent demonstrated the patience with me and my schedule as he worked with my assistant Dion to get me right here in this moment. And I want to send a thanks to all of the folks behind the scenes who are helping ensure that this convocation is a success. But most importantly, though, I want to thank President McCorn for the invitation and of course, his friendship. We have known each other for a long time, from our formative years at Morehouse to his stellar leadership of this historic institution. I've always been impressed by the quality of his character and the depth of his commitment to us. And of course, he does so with a smile. Now, I don't have much time, so let me jump right into this. We gather today against the backdrop of a nation on a knife's edge. The recent shooting of Jacob Blake in Kenosha, Wisconsin, the police killing of Trayford Pellerin in Lafayette, Louisiana, the public murder of George Floyd in Minneapolis, the death of Breonna Taylor in Louisville, the death of Rashard Brooks in Kentucky, of Ahmaud Arbery, I could go on. And people are in the streets protesting what has been obvious to many of us for generations, that in this country supposedly committed to the basic principles of democracy, the lives of Black people are less valued than others. Today, right now, in this moment, we face a moral reckoning. And we do so in a time where a global pandemic is killing people indiscriminately, especially Black and brown people in this country, when our economy has collapsed and those who have the luxury of working from home or who are making money hand over fist now demand that some of us, the most vulnerable among us, go back to work and serve them. It's happening in a time when people can't pay their bills, their rent, can't put food on the table, and the planet is screaming because we're killing it. It's happening in this moment, and we find ourselves having to engage in this haunting public ritual of Black grief. We have to watch the videos of Black death on perpetual loop, and we hear the weeping of those who have lost a loved one to the hands of the police. And this is happening in a moment of political strife. It seems that the ghost of this country's racist past now haunt out in the open. Political partisanship in this country is firmly connected to deep racial divisions. We see this as the President of the United States exploits white fear, exploits white grievance and resentment for his own political gain. In the face of what has been, by any measure, a disastrous first term, close to 40% of the country applaud what they see. The ugly underbelly of America is now clearly seen by all of us. In so many ways, the American idea is in trouble. We have too long told ourselves a story that secures our virtue and protects us from our vices. But today we confront the ugliness of who we are. At least I believe we do. That ugliness isn't just Donald Trump or murderous police officers or loud racists screaming horrible things. It is the image of children in cages with mucus-smeared shirts and soiled pants glaring back at us. Parents separated from their children after risking everything to come here only because they believed in the idea of America. It is Oscar Ramirez and his 23-month-old daughter face down, washed up on the banks of our border. And all of this has happened, is happening in the name of the American idea. As all of this is unfolding, I found myself struggling with despair. The country had done it again. It had betrayed us. The euphoria of the election of the first president and the declarations that we had turned a corner was made clear what they thought about it with the venom of Trump's presidency. We have been here before. We've had a chance to be otherwise, and the nation doubled down on its ugliness. The Civil War and radical Reconstruction come to mind. That's what historians call the second founding. This is the formation of the modern US nation state with a power for taxation, right? The very modern notion of America is forged in this moment. The passage of the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, right? Untethering citizenship from an idea of race, giving us due process and the like, right? All of this was met with the passage of Jim Crow in the South. Frederick Douglass lived long enough to see Abraham Lincoln sign the Emancipation Proclamation and to see the state of Mississippi pass the first Jim Crow law. He died a year before Plessy versus Ferguson. He called these folk the apostles of forgetfulness. It's at the same time that we see the sedimentation of Jim Crow in the South, we also see the conscription of Black labor through policing and the criminal justice system. Convict leasing, that other form of slavery, which helped build cities like Birmingham, emerged. In response to the second founding, we get what? Jim Crow in the South, convict leasing. We also see the ideology of Anglo-Saxonism justifying America's imperial ambition across the globe. We get the lost cause at the moment in which we reached for a different way of being as a nation to be a truly multiracial democracy. The country doubled down on its ugliness. It doubled down on the belief that white people mattered more than others. The same thing happened in the mid-20th century. The Black freedom struggle demanded broad-based inclusion, that the country simply live up to what it put down on paper, as Dr. King said. Historians refer to this period as the Second Reconstruction, an attempt to fulfill the broken promises of the first. But what did we get in response? Calls for law and order, putting in place the cornerstone of what would become the carceral state. And that's not just a Republican story. We saw the tax revolt in California, which laid the foundation for shredding the social safety net. We heard calls for the forgotten American, the so-called lost, forgotten American, the silent majority, as they call it. Hard hat rebellions, the violence against school busing, and of course, the election of Richard Nixon in '68, and then the election of Ronald Reagan in 1980. Again, the country had a moment, a chance to be otherwise, and instead it doubled down on its ugliness. And just in 2008, when we elected our first African-American president, Barack Obama, and folk were talking about that the country had turned a corner, what did we get in response? We got the vitriol of the Tea Party, voter ID laws and voter suppression, and then we vomited up Donald Trump. At every turn, when we face the kind of moral reckoning in this country, the kind of moral reckoning we face now, we have doubled down on our ugliness. In light of this, I found myself struggling with despair and rage. Despair that the country had done it again. Rage that my child was having to go through this, having to experience this again, just as I had to experience it, just as his grandfather had to experience it, and his great-grandfather had experienced it. And of course, when despair and rage mix, all hell can break loose. So I reached for James Baldwin. I reached for resources to help me understand how to pick up the pieces and how to continue to struggle in light of America's ongoing betrayal. Baldwin insisted that the country confront the lie that sustains its innocence. As he put it in The Fire Next Time, it is not permissible that the authors of devastation, he wrote, should also be innocent. It is the innocence that constitutes the crime. America runs around claiming that it is an example of democracy achieved, while folk are languishing in ghettos and in prisons. Baldwin relentlessly exposed the lies that America told itself. The country was not a beacon of virtue. It is not an example of democracy achieved. It is not the shining city on the hill. We tell ourselves this lie in order to protect ourselves from what we have done. Baldwin insisted, and I found this among the 7,000 pages of his writing, that we deconstruct all that the nation holds sacred, that we tell the truth so that we might release ourselves into a different way of being in the world. It took me a while to embrace Jimmy. He was asking something of me that I dared not answer. Baldwin believes that in order to say anything about the world and our social arrangements, about the messiness of the world, that we have to deal with the messiness of our interior lives. He believes in the Socratic dictum that the unexamined life is not worth living. In order to read Baldwin, in order to absorb his lessons, I had to deal with what was happening inside of me. I had to deal with the fact that I was this vulnerable little boy raised on the coast of Mississippi who had all of these daddy issues. And once I grappled with that, honestly, I saw that the sentences on the page danced a bit, that I could reach for my own voice in this moment, that I could deal with my rage and despair honestly and not fall for idols that offered easy answers. To tell the truth so that we might be released into a different way of being in the world. That's at the heart of my book, Begin Again. How do we keep fighting when the times seem so dark? How do we muster the energy and the courage to keep pushing this damn boulder up the hill? Baldwin had to ask himself those questions. He had to come to terms with what happened to the Black freedom struggle in such a short period of time. He had to understand the angry cries of Black power, the white fantasy that was Ronald Reagan. He had to tell the truth even as cancer ate his throat. Huh. And part of what I do and begin again is I focus on the later Baldwin more than the early Baldwin. There's a standard story of Baldwin's career as somehow being a story of declension, that in his later years, the quality of his prose, the quality of his artistic vision declined because he became so bitter. He became so angry, he succumbed to the ideology, the propaganda of Black power. And what Baldwin was grappling with was despair in the face of the country's betrayal. He was a writer of the after times, that moment when the country has turned its back on the possibility of being otherwise, and the darker forces threaten to choke the life out of the new baby trying to be born. But even in the early days of his writing, Baldwin's themes, right, still resounded. They still packed the punch. In fact, what he does in the later years is try to grapple with those themes in the context of different material conditions, in the context of trauma, wound, and pain. For example, in 1962, James Baldwin published an essay in the New York Times Book Review entitled As Much Truth as One Can Bear. The article was an extended meditation on the role of a new generation of writers, among whom Baldwin was fast emerging as a leading voice, and the challenge they face as American artists, writing in the shadow of people like Hemingway, Fitzgerald, and Faulkner, writing in the shadow of a mass movement for democracy. These writers, some say, were and still are sacrosanct and often served as a standard to judge the inadequacy of the younger generation. The past, Baldwin maintained, full of these giants, was used to bludgeon the present, right? And those who inevitably fell short. Now, I mention this not to engage in an analysis of Baldwin's somewhat impious engagement with the American literary canon. Rather, it is what he says about the role of the artist. And here he echoes Emerson's view of the poet that strikes me as particularly relevant this morning. As Baldwin wrote, quote, "The effort to become a great novelist simply involves attempting to tell as much of the truth as one can bear, and then a little more," end quote. We must, as Jimmy put it, quote, "deal with what words hide and what they reveal," end quote. This is all the more important in a country like our own, where our stories obscure the horrors of what we've done and ensure our sense of innocence and inherent goodness. Telling the truth here, or what one might describe as bearing witness, especially in dark times like our own, requires a certain kind of courage and commitment to shatter national illusions that offer safety and comfort and protect the order of things. It involves risking it all in moments like these in order to release us into a new way of being together. This will entail at times a withering criticism of the past that haunts and constrains, a scathing critique of our self-conception. As Baldwin put it, quote, "We live in a country in which words are mostly used to cover the sleeper." Words are mostly used to cover the sleeper, not to wake him. And therefore, it seems to me, he wrote, the adulation so cruelly proffered our elders has nothing to do with their achievement, but has to do with our impulse to look back on what we imagine to have been a happier time. It is an adulation which has panic at the root, end quote. An adulation which has panic at the root. Baldwin is unsparing in his criticism. And it reminds me of the recent speech of President Trump at the Republican National Convention. A kind of history that protects our innocence, a kind of history that looks away from the ugliness of what we've done, a kind of history that denies the bitterness at the bottom of the cup, a kind of history that has panic at its root. Baldwin wrote, quote, "One hears in the work of all American novelists," and I would even add our current politicians, right? Songs of the plains, the memory of a virgin continent mysteriously despoiled, though all dreams were to have become possible here. We know this, he writes, this did not happen. And panic, then, to which I've referred, comes out of the fact that we are now confronting an awful question of whether or not all our dreams have failed. How have we managed to become what we have, in fact, become, Baldwin writes. And if we are, as indeed we seem to be, so empty and desperate, what are we to do about it, end quote. What are we to do about it? A longing for a happier time, a kind of nostalgia allows us to turn our heads away from the difficulties of our days. We want to make America great again, or we pine for the days before Donald Trump. We long for Barack Obama and Michelle Obama, as if America's loss of innocence is a recent event, or as if the issue is the loss of innocence at all. Baldwin insists, and I want to insist as well, that we have to ask the hard questions that get us to the heart of the matter. How shall we put ourselves in touch with reality? Baldwin understood the pernicious effects of the lie on America's character. That the lie involved what we tell ourselves, for example, about Black and white people, that white people ought to be valued more in this country than others. And we have witnessed the monstrous consequences of what follows from this view in terms of our dispositions and practices. We've witnessed the monstrous consequences as we've buried our babies over and over again. Again, Baldwin insisted, and it is an insistence that we must follow if we are to survive our own darkness, that the writer to whom we are indebted, the writers to whom we are indebted, are those, quote, who are compelled to take it upon themselves to describe us to ourselves as we now are, to tell the truth about who we are, to not lie, to not sugarcoat it, to look the fact of our ugliness squarely in the face. America has to choose whether it will finally become a genuine multiracial democracy. And this involves grappling with the past that continues to haunt our present living. That George Floyd or Breonna Taylor or Jacob Blake or Trayvon Pellerin or all of the dead that is ours were simply the latest victims of the slave codes that have shaped the way Black communities are policed in this country. That we have to tell the truth about the wealth gap, the achievement gap, the disparities in healthcare. We have to take it upon ourselves, Baldwin writes, to describe us to ourselves as we are now. Trouble that we face is deeper than we think, because the trouble is in us. It's not just about Donald Trump. It's not just about loud racists. And it's not just about Republicans. It's about us. This stuff ain't new. Voter suppression isn't new. Policing isn't new. Voter ID law isn't new. America's racism isn't new. We have to confront who we are in order to release us into a different future. Baldwin writes, and it's so important, we will never conquer. We will never conquer this unbearable human isolation. We will never establish human communities until we stare our ghastly failure in the face. We all have been birthed in the American fantasy of itself as an example of democracy achieved. That fantasy has distorted and disfigured our moral sense because it requires that we lie to ourselves about what we've done. A lie that thrives on a kind of willful ignorance makes this place, it makes us, more accurately, it makes white folk monstrous. I believe it is the task of all of us in this moment to do exactly what Baldwin called for in 1962 and what he extended all the way to the last day he took his breath in December of 1987. That we mount, quote, an unending attack on all that Americans believe themselves to hold sacred. It is to unmask the panic at the root. And in doing so, we must risk everything in this moment. America is broken. You have come of age amid catastrophe. You have come of age amid catastrophe. You know the country is broken. You've experienced the impact of climate change. You know what it means to have student loan debt overwhelm credit card debt. You have seen the effects of a global recession. You know the impact of a global pandemic. You have experienced mass murders and school shootings and police killings. You have grown up in catastrophe. Some among you reach for progressive politics because you know the words that we use hide and obscure. So you're looking for a different language. But others have turned to authoritarianism or fascism. All of you are reaching for language that can help us make sense of what the American fantasy with its particular words have hidden and concealed. Baldwin is right. Quote, our own record must be read. The air of this time and place is so heavy with rhetoric, he writes, so thick with soothing lies, that one must really do great violence to language. One must somehow disrupt the comforting beat in order to be heard. You got to sing off key in order to be heard. You have to tell the truth in this moment. You have to risk everything right now, right here, because the country stands on a knife's edge. We face a moral reckoning, and folks are all too willing to tell lies, to double down on the ugliness. We've had a second founding. We've had a second Reconstruction. We need a third founding. We got to tell ourselves a different story. We have to finally untether democracy from this belief that white people matter more than others. We have to begin again. The world as we wish it to be drives our descriptions. It drives our choice of words, our rude positions, and our hard questions. For those of us catching the brunt of this hell, the normative question is always lurking in the shadows or staring you right in the face. To describe ourselves as we are is to tell the truth that sets in place the conditions for the possibility of a new America, a new imagining, a different way of being together. Every time we find ourselves on the precipice of birthing a new America, white supremacy is the umbilical cord wrapped around the baby's neck. We have to be better midwives this time. Baldwin put it, it's a famous quote, from this essay, as much truth as one can bear. Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it's faced. We cannot stick our heads in the sand this time. We cannot tinker around the edges and leave the old frame intact. We must shake loose from the shibboleths of the past and their gods and begin again. Remember, no matter what they have done to us, no matter the death that shadows our steps, we must not turn away from our responsibility in this moment, in this time. As Jimmy put it in Just Above My Head, his last novel, responsibility isn't lost. Responsibility is abdicated. And if one refuses abdication, one begins again. Thank you to the mighty class of Clinton College. I appreciate you. I look forward to fighting this battle with each and every one of you. The world needs you. We all can't be poets, but we must all bear witness. Take care.
Wow, what a powerful and prophetic message. We cannot all be poets, but we can all bear witness. Thank you, Dr. Glaude, for such a provocative challenge. And how blessed we are that Dr. Glaude is with us now. We have an opportunity to engage with him, to ask a couple of questions of him. Hello, my brother. So good to see you. Thank you again, man, for what you have done for us. And these words will reverberate for a long time. I want to start off the Q&A and kind of take us back a few years when we were both very young and thought we knew everything. As students at Morehouse, there's a famous saying, for those of you that don't know, you can always tell a Morehouse man, but you can't tell him much. But thank God we paused long enough to hear what people were telling us. And I want to kind of ask you to frame the question within the current context in light of where we were 30 years ago. When you look at the modern civil rights movement, there really isn't a movement without college students, and more specifically HBCU students, right? I mean, they became the energetic fire for the movement. And, you know, Jesse Jackson, North Carolina A&T, John Lewis at Fisk, Stokely Carmichael at Howard. And certainly, you know, we were kind of baptized in that in a different way. And so I want to ask you how today's students can begin to view this moment. They may not have a full picture right now at this stage, but you did a good job of kind of talking about how the awesome responsibility is now upon them. But what do you say to Clinton College students and to HBCU students and to students of all stripes, of all institutions?
Well, I think it's important that we understand that this time in our life, these years of being in college are years where we cultivate either the habits of courage or the habits of cowardliness. Right? The choices you make in terms of how are you going to orient yourself to the world? How are you going to orient yourself to injustice? How are you going to orient yourself to the question of a more just society? In some ways, you have an opportunity to grapple with that right now. And we need to remember that Stokely and Muriel Tillinghast and Joyce Ladner and Diane Nash and James, these folk weren't 19, 20, 21, 22, that they were young. And that they risked everything in that moment. When we were at Morehouse, it was at the heart of the divestment campaign, where we were trying to get Morehouse and the AU Center to divest from Coca-Cola because Coca-Cola was invested in South Africa. I remember marching in Forsyth County with Hosea Williams. After, you remember that?
Oh, yeah.
So there's a training ground that constitutes the college experience where we cultivate certain kinds of habits. And I think you need to understand, we all need to understand ourselves in these sorts of spaces as really kind of engaged in the ongoing preparation of being good citizens, of being people who are committed to speaking and acting on behalf of a more just society, of a new Jerusalem, as it were. So I say to the young students now, understand your power, be brash, take risk, and most importantly, you know, begin that process of reading, right, to kind of get a better understanding of where you fit in this long struggle that constitutes the tradition that is the wind beneath your wings.
Awesome. Also, as a follow-up, you do a great job of explicating and exposing the lie. You know, that metaphor has so much power because it is a direct challenge to what America believes is the truth, right? These myths that sort of concretize white supremacy. And, you know, Malcolm X has a one of my famous quotes from Malcolm X is racism is like a Cadillac. They bring out a new model every year. And, we thought, certainly by this time in our lives, that we would not be fighting the same kind of fights the same kind of way. And the way that racism has a way of, reemerging is just incredible. It's like a Leviathan that just never dies. What do you think? Because Baldwin was so skilled at doing this, and you certainly have the mantle upon you. What do you think Baldwin would say about this latest iteration of racism, and how America, specifically African Americans, need to make the adjustment to fight against, to cut off the head of this ugly lie?
So President McCorn, I would never try to anticipate Baldwin's language or what he would think or what he would say. I don't want to exhibit that kind of hubris. He has 7,000 pages worth of work that we can return to. And I would think that one of the things that is evident in that body of work is Baldwin's insistence that we tell the truth, that the country's refusal to tell the truth about what it has done, right, blocks it from actually maturing, growing into a full-fledged democratic society. So we continue to lie to ourselves about who we are. We continue to have a society predicated upon disposable people, an economic system that is all about extraction, right, that leaves behind folk. So I think part of what we have to say, and in some ways this is echoing what Jimmy wrote and what he said during his lifetime, is that we just have to demand that the nation tell itself the truth, right? That we can't, kind of stay comfortable in our lives, these swaddling clothes, as it were. And so what does it mean to tell ourselves the truth in this moment? Just as Baldwin saw in 1980 that America was reaching for a Hollywood fantasy in electing Ronald Reagan. And Reagan, we must remind ourselves, Reagan for some activists was as notorious as George Wallace. He was the governor of California during the repression of the Panther Party. He was the governor of California. And in the context of Angela Davis and her crises, right? Reagan was as notorious as George Wallace, and for the country to elect him as the Redeemer in Chief was a slap in Black America's face. And now here we are in this moment again, reaching for a fantasy. We reached for him in 2016. Instead of it being a Hollywood B-list actor, it was a reality television show, television actor. And so that fantasy is rooted in this idea that America is a white nation in the vein of old Europe, a refusal to deal with who we are on the ground. And so part of what we have to do, and I said this in the talk, is we have to bear witness, which means we have to make the suffering real, which means we have to tell the truth no matter the cost. That's what we have to do in this latest iteration of the lie.
Absolutely. Good. Let me try to field a couple of more questions. We got a few more minutes. One of our VPs asked, Ms. Ingram, what would you say to the students who are in a decidedly red state like South Carolina when it comes to the need for them to vote?
Well, obviously you have to exercise that the franchise, but you have to exercise the franchise in a mature way. Don't allow anybody to take you for granted. There's a sense in which, and I wrote this in my last book, Democracy in Black Dot, that oftentimes the political parties and political actors treat Black folk like cattle chewing cud. And they only come around every 2 to 4 years trying to herd us to the polls. And then they don't deliver anything. They don't deliver anything in terms of the material conditions of our lives. And so what we have to do is to understand our power at the ballot box, to leverage it, to understand the importance of this particular election, to show up and to show out in some ways. But I think it's really important for us to be more politically mature in how we approach voting, how we approach the political process altogether. That's what's in my head in this moment.
Mm-hmm. Good, good. One of our professors, Professor Hussein, asked the question, which was Dr. King's last question to us: where do we go from here, especially as it relates to people of color? Clinton is diverse. We have a diverse staff, and trying to build solidarity, but there are forces that would try to divide us. And so what do you see as a path forward in terms of what Bishop Barber calls fusion politics?
Yeah, we got to do it. We got to enact it on the ground. We got to first, the precondition for all of this is to tell the truth. Because once we tell the truth, then we set the stage for reconciliation. Once we reconcile, then we set the stage for repair. So, it's sequential, as Brian Stevenson would say. It's sequential.
Mm-hmm.
And so part of what we have to do, I think, President McCorn, is to figure out how to be together differently. We have to, because we're walking mysteries to each other in so many ways, and what stands in the stead of actual knowledge are stereotypes and assumptions about who we are. So part of what we have to do is tell the truth about what we've done to set the conditions for us to imagine our relation to each other differently. And that's going to require, as Bishop Barber would say, a revolution of value. We're going to have to flip what we actually value and begin to see the human being right in front of us. But you know what that's going to require of you and me, of us? We got to stop dancing.
Mm-hmm.
We got to stop allowing people to tinker around the edges.
Mm-hmm.
We got to stop worrying about whether or not people are comfortable. We have to tell our truths. We have to take the risk now. Otherwise, we're going to condemn our grandbabies to this mess and their babies to this mess.
Amen. Amen. You've spoken from the prophetic tradition. Finally, I want to ask, as it appears to most of us, there's an unholy marriage between the white evangelical church and white Christian nationalism that is kind of driving the attitudes, behaviors, ideologies, and policies. But there has been, to your point, some reticence on behalf of Black churches and Black leaders to speak to it. You wrote a piece that you became famous for years ago that said the Black church is dead. So what do you think now the Black church has to do? Is there resurrection in these here bones?
Well, there has to be. You can't be a Christian if you don't believe in resurrection,
mm-hmm.
right? But you got all of these folk running to Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
They don't want to deal with what Saturday represents. Right? They want to run to Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so part of the question is, what does it mean to be a Saturday Christian in these moments? In this moment, And so I think part of what we have to do is to insist that Black churches, reclaim the bedrock, the foundational stone of their existence. Black churches came into being as an assertion, right, of the quality. Let me say it differently. Black churches came into existence as an assertion that we were God's children, that God was no respecter of persons, right? And so it seems to me, I would love I'm not trying to make everybody Pentecostal because I grew up Catholic, as you know, but I would want the Black church to be seen. I want folk to look at Black churches and say they must be drunk, that they're maladjusted to the world as it is. But we live in a time where you have a gospel that is consistent, a coextension of an economic philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so I think it's important for prophetic voices like your own to be even more boisterous, to be even more critical, because Jerry Falwell Jr. is just the tip of the damn iceberg.
Mm-hmm. Amen. Amen. Well, let me express my profound gratitude to you, brother. We could stay here all day talking, but you got some more talking to do in some other places. Those of you who don't follow Dr. Glaude, please follow him on Twitter. I get to see, I guess you and Imani Perry are teaching class together. Is that right?
Yes, indeed. We're teaching Du Bois today. It's going to be great.
Oh my God. I would love to be a fly on the wall. Amazing work. So proud of you, brother. Thank you for spending time with us. And we're going to find a way to bring you back. Our students, let me put it up on the screen. Here is his new book. This powerful New York Times bestseller is entitled Begin Again. All of our students will have it this week. It is being downloaded to their Microsoft Surface Pros, and they will all have access to it. And our faculty and staff will also get it to read. And those of you who are an extension of the Clinton family, we invite you to join us and read along with us. And we'll keep you posted on events that we will have virtually for you to join in discussion. Dr. Glaude, we're praying for you. That God will continue to keep you safe and strong. You're an important voice in this moment. So keep sounding the trumpet, brother, and may God bless you and keep you. We are now going to sing Alma Mater as we make our way out of our fall convocation. Thank you all for joining us, and God bless you.
We take our stand to honor thee. We'll honor, cherish thee, as thou art and we plead. Enter on thee, O soul, we love you so. When we enter the gates, when we are classes take, we pledge allegiance to honor thee. We'll honor, cherish thee, as thou art heavenly queen. Enter on thee, O soul, we love you so. We'll honor, cherish thee, as thou art heavenly queen. Enter on thee, O soul, we love you so. We love you so. We love you so.
Good morning, friends. Lashika Gaston here again. I want to thank you for joining our Fall Convocation virtual broadcast. We hope that you will continue to be a part of our Clinton College community by visiting our website and following us on social media. We will convene again in this virtual space in 2 weeks at 11 a.m. on Wednesday, September the 16th, for the first Beacon Forum for the fall 2020 semester. All Clinton College students are expected to attend. We welcome all members of our virtual community to join us for Beacon Forum. It is a time set aside for our student body to gather for inspiration, spiritual enrichment, and conversation with leading thought leaders such as Dr. Eddie Glaude. You can join us on Facebook, on YouTube, or streaming live from our Clinton College website. Best wishes to our faculty, our staff, and our students as we embark upon another semester of learning and growing together as a Golden Bear family. Be safe, wear your mask, register to vote, wash your hands, and drink plenty of water. Continue to strive for excellence without excuse. See you September the 16th.